Hi, welcome to the Yarn and Yarns YouTube channel. My name is Angela. All the places you can find me online should be linked below. I'm most active on Instagram, where you'll find me as both Rainbow Ange and as Yarn and Yarns. Rainbow Ange is my personal account and Yarn and Yarns is the account for the small business that I operate. I run a bricks and mortar yarn shop just outside of Cardiff in South Wales in the UK. Thank you so much for joining me as usual today. Very big welcome to anyone who has recently found the channel, and of course a big hello and welcome back to anyone who has joined me a few times or many times before. I always appreciate spending time with you. Here on the channel you'll find me chatting about my adventures in knitting and spinning and crochet for the most part. Every now and then I'll pop up a video about my life in the shop as a yarn shop owner. This week it is a back to normal episode, so I have some knitting, some spinning and some crochet. I am operating on a bit of a time crunch today. I am heading out hopefully to a new to me knit group that's starting up in Cardiff. So I've got a few minutes before I need to hop on the train. So I'm trying to squeeze an episode in. I'll try not to go too fast or to babble, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to start with crochet today. I have got a finished object and a work in progress to chat about this week. So first off is my finished object, which is a little blanket that I have been crocheting. Try and get, that's more or less the width of it. And that's the other side. So I started this a couple of weeks ago. I needed kind of a mindless / mindful project to work on, and we started a little log square style workshop in one of my groups. So we started with this centre square, and then you just build out in pattern along the sides, and then you flip it around and do the other sides, and it kind of mimics the very traditional log cabin pattern that you see in quilting, patchwork and quilting. So I decided to make mine a baby blanket. I was using up some scraps, so the grey is some Stylecraft Special DK in the silver colourway. The purple in the middle here is from Yarn Stories, and it's their Merino DK base. The blue is from Designer Yarns Baby Joy. They're a company that's no longer in existence, but I had some leftovers from a project that I made previously. And then for this outer round, you might just about notice, hang on if I flip that over, the outer purple is slightly lighter than that Yarn Stories, and this is another Designer Yarns double knit sort of wool acrylic mix. Can't remember the colourway on that one, but it's not really important because, as I say, it's a discontinued yarn. I ran out of the Yarn Stories purple lilac. I think actually it's called lilac, the colourway, but I wasn't really quite at the size that I wanted the blanket to be. Originally I thought it might be a bit of a larger blanket, but I came to the end of the silver and the blue, and while I'd picked out, I have more balls of the silver, and I'd picked out a deeper blue to continue. Actually I thought if I put one round of the new lilac colour that I started around the edge, then this would actually make a nice sort of pram / cot size blanket, and then I finished it off with just a really simple shell border. So yeah, it was a fun little project to keep me going for a couple of weeks when I needed a little bit of a project that I could just sink my teeth into without needing to think too much. This was made on a 4mm hook, and it will now be donated. I'm going to send this off to a lovely organisation that we have here in the UK called Knit for Peace, and Knit for Peace will accept knitted and crocheted goods of all descriptions, as well as supplies, and they take donations as well, and then they send off items to various charitable organisations both here in the UK and across the world. They just find organisations that will make use of the things that they've been sent. So yeah, I'll put a link to their website below, but this will go off to Knit for Peace. I actually continually collect items for charity in my shop. I have a little box in my office, and people donate things that they've made or things that perhaps the kids have grown out of, that I periodically just pack up a bag and send it off to Knit for Peace. So my little crochet log cabin blanket will go in that little pile. The next crochet project is a work in progress, and this one is in a bit of a timeout. So I have been making this project. This is my oldest project on the needles aside from blankets, and it's a tunic top, a pattern from Stylecraft in their batik yarn. And I started this a couple of autumns ago, then I lost steam on it and it's just been hibernating. But this year, as you may know if you have joined me before, I am trying to alternate between working on my oldest works in progress to give them a boost and get them finished, and then I treat myself to a week of working on whatever I like. This has actually been a week of working on whatever I like, but when I finished this log cabin blanket earlier on in the week and I fancied picking up some more crochet, I went back to the iron tunic. But this is now going to be in timeout. I've finished the front and the back and I joined them together, and I'm just going to quickly slip this on over my head. I don't have sleeves or anything yet, but you'll see the issue, hopefully. So I don't even need to wheel you back. Look at that. This is a gripe of mine that happens often when I make patterns. So this pattern is great in that it includes larger sizes. I am a larger person. However, often I find that larger sizes don't get test worked. Look at the ridiculous neckline on that. I've even added the neck border on this, and it's just sitting way off of my shoulders. So I now have a bit of work to do to see if I can make this work for me. Bring you back a little bit closer. I have a couple of options. So I've picked up around the neckline and just done one row of double crochet as instructed in the pattern. My original thought was that maybe I would do a couple of rounds of double crochet just to fill this space in, but actually I like the look. It's quite just a delicate finish off to this pattern. There's nothing too bulky there. So I'm thinking, why should I compromise on that part of the pattern that I like just to get it to fit me? So what I'm thinking at the moment is I will need to unpick these shoulder seams, take out obviously the neckband that I have done. That row is just one row, so that will be easy. I'm going to take out these panels which shape the sides for the neck edge, and I am going to make it so this flat piece in the middle is a bit narrower. So I'm going to work these rows a bit wider. I may even make the neck shaping much shallower, because when I've got it on, as you can see, the neck at the back is dropping quite low, and it's dropping quite low at the front as well. So I am contemplating, once I've ripped back to this point where you split for the two sides, is actually working up another 4 rows in the pattern and then doing, as I say, less of a gap between the two sides, so the neck edge there will be much narrower, and then a bit less shaping, so hopefully that will kind of bring the shoulders in. So I think that is what I'm going to do, but this is going in the naughty corner for a few days before I have the motivation to do that. Yeah, as you can probably hear in my voice, I am feeling very fed up with that project. This is quite a wide neckline, and it is quite a low neckline, but obviously this is a smaller size person and this is not falling off of her shoulders. It just, yeah, it makes me cross that pattern companies bring out these patterns and they sell them as, you know, including larger sizes, which is great, but then they haven't actually done the design work to make sure that the larger sizes fit. Yes, by nature I'm going to be slightly wider than that model, but yeah, anyway. You get the drift. The yarn that I'm using in that pattern is a lovely batik Elements rather than the original batik that Stylecraft brought out. It's a wool acrylic blend. I'm using the colour Iron. The yarn is lovely to work with. I have no problems with that, and I'm working it up on a 4mm hook. If the things that I have in mind to try and fix that neckline do not work, I'm just going to frog the project because I don't love it enough to spend umpteen hours redesigning something that, you know, I shouldn't need to. If it was a garment that I was really passionate about, then I would spend some more time, but I'm going to try that as a one-time try fix. If not, I shall frog the project and use the yarn for something else. On to spinning. I have been doing a lot of plying this week, so I had a few bumps of fibre that I'd spun up. These are little samples that I have been working through, and there was a few sat there waiting for me patiently to get around to plying them up. So that's the main bulk of my spinning time this week, and I'm excited to say that I actually got round to trying a bit of chain plying, which I have been saying that I was going to do for ages. Chain plying is a technique which results in a 3-ply yarn. You are creating a loop with your yarn, and then you're pulling up your fibre through that loop, so you're basically making sort of a crochet chain with your hands, and it means that you are often plying the same colours on to each other. It's a great way to keep the colour progression in any lovely dyed fibres that you have. A lot of times you'll see lovely hand spun yarn which are sort of a mild mix of lots of different colours, which are beautiful, but the chain ply allows you to keep the sort of colour groupings together. You will still get some marling as the colours change, because it's pretty nigh impossible to you know, create chains so that you're only applying the same colour onto each other. But I had put aside a couple of different fibres to have a go at chain plying with. The first one was the lovely green Blueface Leicester that you would have seen in my last video. I was about to start spinning this up. There are darker and lighter streaks in this. The light is very variable today, so I'm sorry if you're not seeing this very well. In person you can definitely see that there are strands of this yarn that are darker versus strands that are lighter. My chain plying is not perfect, you can see it's quite bobbly, but I'm pretty pleased. For my first couple of attempts, I think I've done okay. Oh, that actually shows you quite nicely the different sort of colours that have grouped together to form that yarn. So I'm looking forward to knitting that up and seeing what that one looks like. The other little bump of fibre that I had saved for chain plying was a rolag that I had from Rosie's Fibre Adventures over on Etsy, and this was in her stone colourway. I spun up a bunch of these rolags and plied them together, but I saved one to attempt some chain plying with. So again, you can see I've got sort of quite big runs of the various colours there, so when I knit this up I should get some nice sort of stripy patches. So it was much easier. I don't know why I built it up in my head as something that I thought I couldn't do or would be super tricky. Obviously these little skeins that I've made are not the neatest. It's, you know, not the best yarn that you're ever going to see, but I think as I've learnt with my hand spun, perfection is not always required, and when you knit them up they often look more lovely than in the skein. So I'm pleased with these as a first attempt, and as I say, the technique was not as daunting as I thought it was going to be. I also managed to ply up another bump of the Blueface Leicester yarn that I had in these pretty sort of oranges and yellow colourways. So that one is really nice. These are just 2 plies. And then I had quite a large bump of natural colour fibre, which I got as a sample when I purchased my spindle from the Spinner Stash. And so I've been spinning my way through this, and I've been itching to get this finished because I want to pop it into a knitting project. So I'm going to save that to talk about again in my knitting section. But I've got one more spinning thing to show you, and I've also spun up and just plied this lovely fondant fibre little bump, and you can see that it's glittering away like mad. So this was in her Illume sample pack. And this was the only real sort of glittery one in that pack, but it's gorgeous shades of sort of navy blue and charcoal down through to blacks, and it creates a real night sky effect. So I can see why adding that sparkle kind of adds to that effect. So this one needs a soak. I've just wound it around my little homemade niddy noddy, and then this one will also be ready to knit up. knitting this week, I have a couple of finished objects to show you and a couple of works in progress. So the first finished object, this carries on kind of from my spinning section. So a couple of episodes ago, I can't remember the episode number, but I believe it was called Practically Monogamous. In my spinning section in that video, I took one bumper fibre and spun it 2 different ways to see if I could come up with 2 different yarns. And so I've started knitting up those yarns, and as per usual I'm making my little gnome creatures from this. This is a lovely pattern from Sarah Shearer, who is Imagined Landscapes online, and this is the Never Not Gnoming pattern. So as you can see, the purple yarn is just some singles that I spun up from a merino fibre a little while ago, but this bottom yarn is the one that I really wanted to show you. This yarn was spun from the fibre in question, and this was the one that I left. If you watch that video, I left this yarn as singles and I separated out the different colours that were in the fibre. There's a little bit of purple on the bottom there. The centre is actually some leftover from there because I ran out of yarn, but there's actually some purple colour in the original fibre, which is why I thought finishing off with that purple really matched in to finish that off. And I have a hat made out of the rest of that fibre that I spun up. So this was the one that I just did my normal technique where I just split the fibre and sort of spun and then just plied it together in a 2-ply without worrying about colour change. So as you can see, I'm going to hold the back of this, you definitely get this sort of striping effect, but it's much more subtle in this one, where the colours are blending and marling together, whereas this is much more obviously separated into those colours and they're showing as much brighter. So if you are spinning or you're thinking about starting to spin and you see fibre that you think maybe is a bit too bright and garish for you, then if you just go for it and start spinning it up and ply it together, then the marling sort of tones down those colourways. So this is obviously a hat and it needs a body, so I thought the lovely sort of soft brown tones in here, it would be really nice to have just a soft brown body for this gnome. So this is where this one comes in that I finished plying up this week. It's going to become the body for the hat that I've already made. So yeah, that was a really fun kind of experiment. Got me really thinking about the fibre that I'm using and how I'm preparing it to get different types of yarn. So I am pleased to have almost finished that experiment. Obviously it'll be nice to have this second little gnome finished. My second finished object this week is a pair of socks, and this is just a pair of plain vanilla socks that I've been knitting for a friend of mine. This is sock number 1. I do have sock number 2 here. I haven't put it on the blocker, only just because I'm trying to save myself a little bit of time and get through this as quickly as I can to try and get this out on my usual day, which is Sunday. I need to get this recorded before I go out so that I can edit it later and upload. So this yarn is from by Miranda May, who is a lovely local indie dyer that I've spoken about before. This was one of her Christmas colourways. This was the Nutcracker colourway, and I knit just a plain sock, 64 stitches, 2x2 rib. I did a heel flap and gusset on this one because it's the first time that I've made a sock for this friend, and I know that a heel flap and gusset gives a little bit more room across the foot here, which fits a lot of people well, so I decided to do that. And because this wasn't a self-striping, it wasn't going to interrupt the sort of colour way at all, so I popped in a heel flap and gusset. I did a traditional slip stitch heel, but I put the sort of garter edge on the sides of the heel there, and I knit them on 2.25mm, and I think these were on Knit Prosings, which is kind of the standard needle that I use for my socks. So yeah, it's nice to have those finished. They've been hanging around on the needles for a few weeks, and they could have been finished before, but my sock mojo has been a little bit lacking recently, and I think that is because I've been really addicted to and wanting to knit on the next 2 projects that are my works in progress this week, and one of them involved a lot of stockinette, just plain knitting in the round, so I didn't really feel the need to work on socks on the days where, you know, I wanted to knit but didn't want to have to think about anything. So the first work in progress that I'm going to show you is living in my oyster catcher bag, which I made myself. For anyone who has seen the last videos, you'll probably know what is in this bag. So this is my hilltop shawl, which is patterned by Helen, who is Curious Handmade, and I am knitting this from my hand spun yarn. This is Llanwenog fibre that I purchased a couple of years ago at Wonderwall, and it's from a lovely producer called Pure Welsh. And I took this on the train with me last week when I went to London. The lovely Anita, who is Gaga Knits here on YouTube, called me out on Instagram when I posted a picture of me working on this on the train, because in my last episode I said that I'd probably take a sock, and then I posted a picture of this, and she very rightly said that that didn't look much like a sock, but I decided to take this with me instead because it's pretty mindless garter stitch knitting with a few rows of lace, so I thought it'd be easy enough to do on the train. I have now finished all by this little bump, the yarn that I've spun up. I have got, so this marker shows where I was when I showed this last, so I managed to do the eyelet section, the garter section, and then the next eyelet section. If I want to do this as per the pattern, I've got another garter pattern, another garter section, and then a picot bind off, so I definitely need more yarn. I'm feeling a little bit apprehensive about that, and again, if you have watched before, you'll have heard me say I've spun up all of this from the first batch of Llanwenog that I managed to purchase, and then this year when I went to Wonderwall I picked up some more Llanwenog. But this fibre preparation is slightly different. It's actually in a bat, whereas the other was just kind of, I don't know if it would have been classed as combed top, but it was much sort of like, I mean, this has still got that lovely cotton wool texture that the my original fibre had, but it's not quite the same. But I purchased the bat anyway, just in case I needed extra fibre. It's a really lovely fibre to spin with, and part of me was hoping that I wouldn't need this extra fibre and that maybe I could play around with a bit of dyeing, because spinning up a natural colour is not the most interesting to me, although I enjoy working with natural colours. Yeah, just spinning through lots and lots of sort of creamy white fibre is not what I find captures my attention, which is why it took me 2 years to spin up that first batch of Llanwenog. But I'm going to spin up a little bit of this week and see what sort of fibre I get in comparison to what I have been working with, and then I'm going to decide whether I will mix that one in to finish off this shawl, or the other option would be, I'm at quite a nice point now, I've finished that eyelet section, I could spin up perhaps another natural colour to put on as a border to this pattern. It's very difficult to show you this because it's scrunched up on the needles, but this fibre is just beautiful to work with. It's lovely and soft and buttery, and yeah, it's been a really fun project. This hand spun fibre seems to really suit this lovely sort of simple garter stitch. So yeah, I'll have a play around with that this week and see where that one goes. My last work in progress, actually before that I will address the fact that I've got flour on my face. There has been a slight change of light and my hair is now up. It's a bit later on in the day. I ran out of time earlier when I was trying to record. I've since had a lovely afternoon with a new knit group in Cardiff, and flour on the face is because I've just been doing a bit of baking with James. Anyway, on to my last work in progress, which I have been utterly obsessed with. This is my Nordiska sweater, which is a pattern by Caitlin Hunter, who is Boyland Knitworks everywhere online. This is a top-down crop sweater, raglan style, with a little bit of colour work at the bottom and on the sleeves. Last time you saw this was in my Easter cast on party video, and this sweater begins by being knit flat and then you join to knit in the round. So the marker on the back here shows where it was last time you saw it, so it would have been this section here, but I have now split for the body and the sleeves, and as you can see I've also added the neck ribbing, and I'll explain a little bit more about why I've done that shortly. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how this is shaping up, and I think my sock mojo has been a bit lacking recently, because this has been a nice round and round stockinette stitch project that you just have to be mindful every few rows for the raglan increases. It satisfied that kind of TV knitting for me in the last week or two, so yeah, the socks have taken a little bit of a backseat. I have tried this on, and I've also blocked the portion of the body that I've knit, because it was coming up quite short on me. So from this point down on the body, the pattern has you knit only 1 more inch in this main colour, and then you start the big band of colour work at the bottom. And while this is a cropped sweater, it was coming up quite short on me, so I thought I would block it out, because the yarn I'm using is superwash merino, which does have a tendency to stretch out a bit. So I thought I'd block it first, see how it's looking, and then decide whether I wanted to add a little bit more length than the pattern suggests. And I think I will, because even after blocking, this as it is really just covering to sort of my full bust point, and the pattern suggests you knit only another inch or so after that, and so I think this will end up being really quite cropped on me if I just did that. I do have quite a lot of yarn left. I've almost used up the first ball of my main colour, so this is all I've got left, is just a little nugget. And this is another yarn from by Miranda May. This is her label. This is the Purple Moon colourway, and it's a 75-25 superwash merino nylon blend. So when I started this, I knit the flat portion from 1 ball, and then when it went to joining in the round, I started alternating skeins. So this is what I have left of the second ball. And I've got a whole 3rd ball yet to start. So what I thought is, if I went back and picked up for the neckline, which I did from that first ball again, and then I'm going to then knit the sleeves, I would have a better idea of exactly how much yarn I've got left to play with. And I think I'm going to have plenty, because I'm basically starting the colour work on the sleeves now. They're a shorter sleeve as well, and the colour work doesn't feature a whole lot of this main colour, and the sleeves, I think the ribbing is done in one of the contrast colours. So once I've finished the sleeves, I'll know exactly how much of that main colour I've got left to play with, so I can figure out how many inches I want to extend down on the body. Last night I actually started on this sleeve knitting the colour work, but as you can see, there is no colour work there. I ripped it all back out because I wasn't happy with one of my contrast colours. So this is the little swatch that I made, and as you can see, it's quite tiny. And I swatched with 2 different types of the orange yarn that we have here, and I was going to go with this orange yarn down here, because although the colour work, as you can see in this part, the colour work's not super defined, these are sort of little half crosses here. But if I show you the yarns, so this is the pale yarn, and it's got speckles of orange and purple in it. So I thought that would look quite nice, because obviously this has got purples and lilacs and blues in the main colour, and then in my contrast yarn there was sort of various oranges. However, what didn't become apparent when I did my little swatch, I was pleased with the sort of watercolour-y effect, but what didn't become apparent in this tiny little piece of knitting that I did, because basically I don't like swatching and I'm quite lazy like that, is that in this yarn that I picked out, there are actually, there isn't one to hand, but there are actually some really dark brown parts, and there's a few stretches of really long sections of that dark brown, and that dark brown next to this purple just wasn't showing up at all. So I wasn't really getting that nice sort of watercolour faded effect. I was just getting a sort of messy band of parts that looked like they were checkered and other parts that just looked like I hadn't knitted it properly. So I think I'm actually going to go to plan B and swap that orange out for this one, which is a much brighter, definitely a tonal orange, and it doesn't have any of those brown flecks in. So I'm going to go back to that for the other contrast. So my colour work will look like this section on the top of the swatch rather than this section on the bottom, which I'm happy with. I've got no problems with, and yeah, I just decided to quit while I was ahead on that one and rip back before I did too many rows. Sadly for me, I'm actually going into a week now where I'm going to work on my older projects. So this, oh, it breaks my heart, it's going to go away for a week, which, yeah, it's really sad because I'm on to the fun bit now. One part of this pattern that I'm not super keen on, when I looked at some people's Ravelry notes, there were a few comments about how people didn't really like the increases around the raglan. The raglan has this little cable detail in the centre of it. You can't really see that super well on mine because of the variegated nature of the yarn, but I knew that would happen and from the outset, so I'm not worried about that. But I think that kind of hides the sort of slightly gappy messiness of the increases, and actually I don't mind it. I think it looks okay. But the thing that I'm not super fond of is when I put on the neckband, it's a V-neck and you decrease around that centre point, and my centre point there is really quite gappy, which I'm not a fan of at all. I've done lots of V-necks before, and usually I found patterns you sort of decrease either side of a centre stitch, which sort of stops that happening, but this pattern didn't have that. So I've got a couple of ends to weave in, so it's not a big problem. I'm just going to go behind and catch this closed, just to neaten that up a little bit. So yeah, I don't think there's much else to say about my Nordiska, except I'm really enjoying it, and yeah, can't wait to get back onto that one in a couple of weeks' time. I've been keeping that in a nice big project bag that I made for myself a little while ago from this fun orange cat fabric. I think that is everything that I wanted to talk to you about this week. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do love spending time with you every time I record. Until next time, I hope you are able to have a wonderful week and get to do some of the things that you enjoy. Great big woolly hugs to you all. Bye for now.